I went to, as Rick just said, I went to the castle. The film is about Rochester Castle, and it's a real place, and it still exists. And I visited the castle in 2006, and I was immediately struck by the site, by what's there. I mean, it is a ruined castle. It's 1,000 years old, the building, but the main Norman keep is still there and intact. And I visited the castle and walked around. I didn't know anything about the history of the castle or any of the battles or the significance of any of its history. And while I was walking around the site, I started reading this story about how a small band of men had withheld the castle, defended the castle against King John and his army. And I was kind of taken by that because it was a royal castle. It was one of King John's own castles. And then, you know, as you go up the spiral staircase to the next level, you read a little bit more, and how this small band of knights had held the castle for like 9 months against King John. And it was kind of like the Alamo, and a little bit like the Seven Samurai or the Magnificent Seven, that kind of a story. And then how King John had attempted all these different ways to get into the castle and to siege it, including finally digging a mine underneath the castle, filling it with pigs, burning the pigs, and collapsing the entire side of the castle. And that's how he finally gained entrance to it and killed most of the people inside. But in so doing, and it took him so long, that another band of men, the rebel barons, were in London, and they were negotiating with the French, and eventually a French army came and saved the day. And basically the story of this small band of men and their kind of heroic endeavors to defend this castle, just like at the Alamo, basically was the act that finally defeated King John and the civil war, the rebellion that had been going on in England for several years. And one of the key events of that rebellion was the signing of the Magna Carta. And King John had actually already signed the Magna Carta at this point. He signed it in June 1215, and then he started to siege Rochester Castle several months later. So he'd already signed that, but even though he'd signed the Magna Carta, he then reneged on his pledges and still carried on being a tyrannical lunatic. And I came away that day being completely struck by the location, by the castle, by the story, what it stood for, liberty, freedom, you know, for men, and thought that would make an amazing movie. I mean, it was like one of those classic moments that we all have, like, wow, that would make a great film. And I went away and started developing the story, started researching the castle further and the people who were there, the battle, wrote a screenplay, was in the process of moving to LA and met Rick, and Rick was one of the first people to read the script, and we started working together and putting the movie together.
Yeah, and for me it was, I read the script and it was right around the time that 300 did so well, and you know, I saw some things about the script that were similar to 300 in that it was like the Battle of Thermopylae. It was something that we didn't really know about. The signing of the Magna Carta is not a big thing that we learn about. It's like a day in high school or something. And so I thought that was interesting, a piece of history that was pretty violent and bloody. And of course the few versus the many, and the thing that I think clinched it for me, reading off the page, is it was a pretty violent read. Jonathan and I talked about sort of what these medieval weapons were like and what it was like to be hit with a broadsword. And it wasn't like we all see in the movies, a straight, you know, slash and your arm flies off. It was actually quite brutal, and it would crunch bones. And we talked about sort of like what in a car accident, what the metal does to the human body and all that. So that was one thing that was just sort of interesting to me. And then we talked about, Jonathan talked about this idea that we really wanted to put the audience into the middle of these battles, a la Saving Private Ryan, the first 20 minutes, where you've seen World War II films and you've seen the invasion of Omaha Beach many times, but you never felt it the way you felt it in that first 20 minutes of Saving Private Ryan. So if we could actually put the viewer into the middle of this battle and do some techniques, you know, put some techniques together where it was a real visceral experience, and after sort of the first few battles, you come away noticing that you're like gripping the seats, and the whole thing is just such a almost out-of-body experience. You know, I thought there was something really interesting that we could do with this film, and we were pretty much on the same page in that we weren't going to do it gratuitously. We were just going to try and be very realistic, and sometimes being realistic with those weapons in those times is much more violent and horrible than anything you could have thought of, you know, as far as just